Welcome to Socialism for All. This is S4A Livestream number 93, being recorded on Wednesday, April 12, 2023. I am joined on Twitch, twitch.tv/socialismS4A, by 41 viewers right now. And it is 15 after the hour. We usually do these things at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. So today we're going to just jump right into it. This week, and maybe for the next few weeks until I'm caught up on COVID stuff anyway, we're going to do a Wednesday and a Thursday stream. So if you're listening to this after the fact on the YouTube channel, don't be sad. You can catch up tomorrow and catch something live if you want. There's plenty of people who can't do these live. That's okay. If you want to ask a question or something, you can always leave it in a comment on another video or DM me if we're mutuals or wherever else people send me messages at. If you're new to the channel, which would be about 500 people in the last month on YouTube, let me introduce myself. I'm a U.S. American studying Marxism, specifically anti-revisionist Marxism-Leninism. That's what we focus on the channel here. I often post human-read audiobooks of socialist works, and I organize them into playlists as well. I sometimes add comments to the text while reading, similar to making margin notes in a book. Sometimes something will really grab me and I'll talk for a minute or two, but it always comes back to the text eventually. And I also sometimes make efforts to explain difficult concepts in the text. That's partly for me, and it's partly for the newer listeners who are jumping in, without several years at least of study. Some of you have been here since the beginning in February 2020. That's of the YouTube channel anyway. We're on Facebook before that, just posting memes and things, and then decided to branch out beyond the memes. We've been kicked off of Facebook 3 times now because it's run by fascists, but hey, that's okay. We've moved on and we're on YouTube, we're on SoundCloud, Twitter, Mastodon, Patreon, Reddit, and all these other places, Spotify. So anyway, we have more than made up for our Facebook deficits. We also do these weekly streams on Twitch, usually Wednesday, 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern, and I do later post the streams to YouTube. Somebody asked me what that is in GMT. So let's see. Matter of fact, I don't do that conversion in my head a lot, so let's see. That would be midnight GMT. So there you go. All right. What else here in the way of introduction? So we announced the stream. Some weeks we don't do a stream, but that's kind of rare. We usually definitely do a Wednesday. Rarely these days a Tuesday, less rarely a Thursday. It depends on whether we're doing one long stream on Wednesday or we're going to break it up. But anyway, yeah, I plan to, for the time being, do kind of general streams on Wednesday and then COVID stuff primarily. Like, it's not exclusively COVID stuff on Thursdays, but I'm going to keep the COVID stuff largely out of the Wednesday stream and then do a Thursday stream that focuses on COVID, but we also, talk about other stuff as well. It's not like it's just going to be COVID from start to finish, and nobody's allowed to bring up anything else. It's not like that at all. So, if you're shying away from the COVID streams because, I don't know, whatever reason you think it's over, it's definitely not. Actually, if you think the pandemic's over, you definitely need to listen to the COVID streams. But whatever, you think it's not as interesting or we're not talking about other political stuff, wrong. It's just that's where we put the COVID stuff, and then anything else is kind of incidental. But there definitely is other stuff. So otherwise, people a lot of times ask for, org recommendations or things. I don't think that we have the party that we need. I think that people have to really get involved in the struggle, and we'll probably see a big reshuffling. I think we have a really weak vanguard right now that's generated by both a lack of study and a lack of struggle. Class consciousness comes both through study, but also through active struggle, whether it's union organizing. We need to rebuild the labor movement and make it militant and internationalist, not just, the better pay and conditions, that's fine. A lot of times that does need to be addressed, but we also need to use our organized labor power for political ends in support of the global proletariat. So that's the sort of revolutionary political aspect to the labor movement that needs to be introduced. However, without a large labor movement, it's not going to matter anyway. No matter what the politics are, we need to keep expanding and building the labor movement generally, and then also make it as militant as possible. But for the time being, my standing recommendations are, if you're looking for a Marxist study group or organization, you might look at Politsturm. They are international, based in Russia, Ukraine, Armenia, and other countries, including the US. So you can study with comrades from around the world. I've heard a lot of good things. I like the materials that they put out on their YouTube and on their website, and they are actually organizing clubs. So, anyway, that would be my recommendation there. And I'm always looking for feedback on people's experiences with that. Otherwise, I encourage people to get involved in their local left, to network and become familiar with the existing parties, unions, and other groups that are engaging in class struggle in your area. With the exception of the Democratic Party, they're completely owned by the 1% and not a suitable forum for ideological struggle. So, a lot of areas only have a DSA or a Green Party or some big tent thing like that. Being that the left still is kind of weak ideologically and otherwise, the right wing of those organizations are going to be opportunist and, not definitely not communist. I mean, neither one is a communist organization, but they may be involved in labor union support or tenant union support, things like that. However, what I was saying is the right wing of DSA is very opportunistic towards the Democratic Party. They will endorse Democrats, and if you do get involved, maybe they're working on minimum wage increases in your area, like whatever it is, do at least fight against the opportunism to the extent that you can. And then, whether you stay with them long term or not, this could be a 6-month, a year, 18-month, 2-year thing, whatever. You can network and try to find other actual socialists, and who knows, maybe make a new organization out of that. I was talking with someone recently where they were building an organization, and that's great. That's really what we need. I think that in many ways we need that kind of reshuffling and almost a redo of rebuilding a militant Marxist left. So that's good. And then likewise in the Green Party, there is, in the right wing of the Greens, you'll find some opportunism towards libertarians and, some kind of contrarian grifter shit. You'll find some anti-vaxxers in the right wing of the Green Party, things like that. So the point, though, is to get out there, network with your local left. We can't improve the left if we're not personally familiar with it, if we don't understand it, if we don't survey what's going on with it. We have to be in a kind of dialogue, and that's how we advance the struggle and make some progress. So I don't think that broad left approach is going to work long term. We absolutely need to build a communist party and so on. But I think at this point, so many people will get involved with, say, a Bernie Sanders campaign and try to reform the Democratic Party when they see predictably that doesn't work. And actually, Bernie wrote a book recently that I have some clips from. I think we're going to get to that in this stream. If not, it's going to be an upcoming stream. When you see that doesn't work, then a lot of people drop out. You can't just drop out. You have to stay engaged in the struggle. So, hold your nose for now, fight against the right wing of DSA or whatever. If that's all that's going on in your area, then at least do that, but don't just give up. That's not a good thing. I mean, if things, really didn't work out and you have a real falling out and there's some, really bad vibes in the org, then, being in a really bad org is not good. But if you can wage a struggle for actually socialist positions, then, attempt it. And like I said, what you're trying to do is fill up your address book, so to speak, is you're trying to make contacts so that if the day comes that Big Tent organization splits into sort of a Menshevik, Bolshevik, sock dem rad lib versus actually communist split, that you'll be in touch with the people and you can get something together. I don't know, how else to do this, so those are my observations from having participated in the U.S. left. All right, enough in the way of that sort of introduction, but again, welcome to the newer people. What's new at the channel? First of all, youtube.com/socialism for all. Well, aside from last week's streams, I have just put up 2 short things. The first is a 10-minute speech from Malcolm X called "Black Nationalism Can Set Us Free." I think that's actually a shorter clip from The Ballad of the Bullet, But anyway, it's a good clip. I recommend listening to it if you haven't heard it before. And then also, just yesterday, I put up A Worker's Inquiry from 1880 by Karl Marx. So basically, this is something that Marx put together for a French magazine called the Socialist Review, La Revue Socialiste. And it's a 100-question survey aimed at workers to try to get information about working conditions and just what workers were facing. There's a few of these, like steam power is used in fewer production facilities today, although as a commenter was informing me, I think it was, well anyway, as a commenter was informing me, there is still steam used in some production. But anyway, we've already gotten 9 or 10 responses from that survey so far. I probably should have mentioned, good transition there. I did the audiobook of A Worker's Inquiry, including the 100 questions. I then also put it together into a Google form document. And I put a link to that, so if you haven't seen that, go check out the video. In the video description and the pinned comment, there's a link to a Google form, and you can fill out this questionnaire. Like I said, we've already gotten, I think, 9 or 10 responses. That's awesome. We're going to look at that in a future upcoming S4A live stream. And let me just see, first of all, look at some of the responses here. And by the way, it's anonymous. I'm not collecting emails or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, if you don't want to put stuff about your workplace that's super personally identifying, I say right in the thing, don't. And again, I'm also not collecting emails. Just really want the data here. So we've gotten responses so far from a janitor, a municipal employee at a water treatment facility, somebody who works in health insurance enrollment and eligibility, agricultural worker, an office admin, electronics assembly, paralegal, and a grocery clerk. So, well, multiple positions in a grocery store. So we're basically, you know, it's kind of for fun, but I think it will also be interesting. And also, if you've never really delved into, you know, somebody asking you about the particulars of your work life, your experience as a proletarian in a workplace, I would dig into it, because I think engaging with that can help you to build your class consciousness. It can make you really think about the conditions that you're facing rather than taking them for granted. You know, when you have to list them and think about what they are, it makes you realize, you know, they could be different. So it's a good way against, you know, taking your working conditions for granted, which are really just what some capitalists decided your work life should be, rather than, you know, you and your coworkers or things like that. So that's what's new at the channel. Do check out that survey if you're so inclined. The survey is going to be up for a while. I understand 100 questions is a lot, so we'll leave it up. Take your time. There's really no rush. It'll be up for weeks. All right. So that said, that's what's new at the channel. We also have some short audiobooks coming up this week. Going to be doing Lenin's some differences in the European labor movement, another short one from Lenin, another short one from Stalin. And then I'm working on a longer piece called The Late Cultural Revolution by Mass Proletariat, basically getting into the Dengist market reforms opening up turn in China in the 70s. So got a text on that, and then have another text coming up on the same topic. And anyway, got some other good stuff coming up this month for audiobooks. But anyway, that. I also said last stream I had to kind of run early, so I wasn't able to get to a couple of pages of chat comments. So I have those here. I'm just going to look through them right now, because people who showed up for the chat did take the time to comment these out, and I want to see if there's anything in there that I want to respond to. All right. I just saw a video about COVID passing through the placenta. Yes. Look up, I forget what it's called. It's like COVID placenta syndrome or something to that effect. COVID can really damage the placenta. And as we were covering in Thursday's stream, there is a COVID-associated stillbirth phenomenon. So basically, from about halfway through the pregnancy, from the beginning of a pregnancy up to about the midway point, if the mother becomes infected with COVID, it increases the odds of a stillbirth. And there's a couple of other risk factors for that, but check out the video. We read a study on it. I think it was a preprint, but there's a lot of data that point towards placental damage and fetal damage due to SARS-2. Let's see. I can't prove it, obviously, but I think that a group of the party killed Stalin and appointed Khrushchev as secretary. The doctors being replaced was too convincing. Somebody else says, wasn't it proven that the doctors tried to kill Stalin? And I was actually just watching a video about that. So this is, I think, known as the doctor's plot generally. And there were a couple of people, it wasn't just Stalin, but there was like a group of doctors that tended to, high party officials at that time giving like fatally bad advice. But none of them were, I wound up watching a Grover Furr video on this, so even Grover Furr doesn't think that it's proven. It's maybe fishy, but I don't know. I'm sure you can find a variety of opinions on that, though. So anyway. Another comment, yeah, it's pretty fair to say that Stalin's death was an assassination. The guy was completely fine, then all of a sudden dead. Doctors give conflicting reports. And his son basically said they killed him and he got sent to jail. So, yeah. And then also the Korean armistice in July 1953 would not have happened under Stalin. Another comment. This is why I say you can't vet your party enough. The assassination of Kirov and the terrorist killings and sabotage just wrecked the USSR. All right. So, few thoughts on that. Again, if you're interested, look up Doctor's Plot. There's a fair amount written about it. Let's see. Holy shit, I didn't know that about diabetes. Yeah, so COVID can cause diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. So it infects the pancreas and destroys part of the pancreas, and it can increase odds, particularly in children, of both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So that is not good. So then there was a comment, I wonder what the vaccination rate of the US is now. So I pulled this, and the vaccination rate is not great. Let me put up some graphics. So it's important to remember that the vaccines wear off. So this is from a website, USA Facts. There are a number of different websites that probably going to have slightly different information about vaccinations. The CDC also posts information about vaccinations. So this is, as of like last week, I just pulled this. You can see it's April 2023 there on the right. And so it says at least 270 million odd people, or 81% of the population, have received at least one dose of a vaccine. Remember, with the COVID vaccines, most of them take 2 shots to get your primary series. And then overall, 230.5 million people, or 69% of the population, basically 2 out of 3, are considered fully vaccinated. So fully vaccinated in this case is kind of a misnomer in my opinion, because the vaccine coverage wears off in a few months. It's good for curbing some of the symptoms and things. I think, though, that as we get into years, deeper into year 4 and year 5 and on, if this thing keeps going, which right now it's showing every sign of doing, then people are just going to be out there with really no coverage, like their coverage expired 15 months ago or something like that. It can curb some of the effects, but as the virus mutates to become more contagious and severe, people are going to get infected with it more often. COVID also harms your immune system. It attacks and kills and also exhausts T cells. So that's like a key part of your immune system. T cells help to do, there's different types of T cells, but they help to stop infections. They also stop cancer from spreading. They will attack and kill cancer. So, if your T cells are either depleted in numbers or they're so exhausted that they're not functional, that's a really bad thing and can lead to, frequent infections that normally wouldn't have been a problem because your immune system would have been on top of it, but it's now hamstrung with the T cell incapacitation. or you know, cancer, because your body is constantly on the lookout for cells where the cell growth process has gone awry. Remember that cancer is basically, you know, unchecked cell growth that just starts, well, it's harm. It causes harm. Sorry, that wasn't clear. Unchecked cell growth. So what it, you know, the T cells go in and curtail that so it doesn't get out of hand. If your T cells are otherwise occupied, the cancer can grow. So that's really a bad thing. SARS-2 is a really serious disease. You don't just have to worry about the upfront pneumonia or, you know, dying in the hospital in the first few weeks. That is a problem, particularly for older people in about the upper the upper third of the age bracket is probably the most likely to succumb during the acute phase. But then there's all the other problems, the heart attacks, the immune damage, the brain damage, all the other things that can happen to people in their 50s, 40s, 30s, even lower. So anyway, vaccines, you know, fully vaccinated, well, is your vaccine coverage actually still functional? So there's a couple of other things here. I thought this was interesting. More females have been vaccinated than males. Not sure why. This is good for a number of reasons. Females more likely to get long COVID. Again, nobody's sure why, but then the percentage of people in different age ranges that have received the vaccine, you can see a clear, the older you are, the more likely it is that you'll have gotten the vaccine. And a couple of other demographic breakdowns here. Percentage of people in each race or ethnic group that received the COVID-19 vaccine. So anyway, you know, it's on the screen there. I don't have time to read it all out now, but if you want to take a look. Then you can look at different states that, you know, proportion that have gotten one dose, and then people who are, quote, fully vaccinated with 2 shots, although now people are on, you know, multiple booster shots because, again, they do wear off. So, yeah, there's another state-by-state breakdown, and then here is the other half of the states if people want to pause it and take a look at that. But I can't read out all 50 states right now. But you can see here, this is from the CDC, and by the CDC stats, only about 1 in 6 people have gotten the updated booster dose. That was the bivalent shot that they rolled out last summer and fall, and 1 in 6 have that, and even those shots are probably worn off by now. So people are very, very vulnerable in terms of their, you know, vaccination status with COVID, and it does roll on. We're in a lull right now, but it does seem to be flattening out, and it's probably going to begin a new climb towards a plateau, exactly like it did last year. So, you know, enjoy the lull while it lasts, but keep masking, keep avoiding crowds as much as you possibly can. COVID is serious, so. All right, let's go back to those leftover chat comments, and we'll get into today's chat after that. All right, what else do we have? Oh, okay, that was it. That was it for last week's chat, and I've, you know, done that before in the past, that I said that I was going to you know, recap the comments, and I don't always get to it, so I was happy to get to that today. All right, so let's get into today's chat then. Let me scroll up to the top, see who's here. We got 56 people in here right now. Hello, everyone, and I'll be trying to catch up with the chat now. I want to mention while I do this, the pandemic emergency as a legal status in the United States was supposed to end May 11. Now, it shouldn't have even done that because we have no reason to think currently. I would love it if the pandemic stopped. I would love it if SARS-2 just stopped circulating. However, currently we have no reason to think that that is going to be happening, yet the U.S. is ending the pandemic emergency and the public health emergency, which means that the Medicaid emergency expansions are getting rolled back in a number of states. All kinds of things. You may not be able to get the vaccines for free anymore. That's going to be on like a state-by-state basis. Fuck Joe Biden for doing this. Absolute piece of shit. Didn't fight for people. He got elected on, I have a plan to end the pandemic. We're going to follow the science, trust the science. 4 months into his presidency, he does vax and relax. If you get vaccinated, you can take your mask off. That right there helped to single-handedly destroy in one swoop most of the collective pandemic response. Then the mandated testing got taken away and everything else. So, we'd be flying blind if it wasn't for the wastewater, which I guess for people who are unfamiliar with this, there's a website, biobot, biobot.io, and if you just click on their front page link, here's last week's. So that dark blue line, not the teal line underneath, that's the wastewater. Wastewater in the U.S. is monitored for a number of different things, including currently SARS coronavirus 2 viral particles. So you get infected, you excrete into the wastewater system, and then they monitor it. And without this, we'd be flying blind. This is going at least through July, and hopefully it will continue. But you can see how much virus was circulating in the wastewater last year. It's insane. It's bigger than any of the surges during 2020, 2021, of course, except for Omicron in December of 2021. And then, but all last year we had this running plateau with a couple of peaks, and we're probably going to have that again this year as new variants have come in. XBB.1.5 was leading this winter surge, and now that has XBB.1.9.1 coming in and XBB.1.16 coming in. So there's new strains every few months, and this is going to continue. So anyway, Biden, gets elected on, I'm not going to shut down the country, I'm going to shut down the virus. Well, look at the chart. Did he shut down the virus? Abso-fucking-lutely not. So again, not fighting for people, throwing us under the bus. Fuck Joe Biden. All right. What else do we have? Oh, and by the way, he was for the public option. That was on his campaign website. He never said it out loud, but he ran on, that was part of his campaign officially in writing. He said that he was for, not for Medicare for all, but for a public option, basically this Medicare for all who want it shit, which is just not how it works. You need to get everybody in the same risk pool. Otherwise, you get what's known as insurance death spirals, where all the high-risk people get into one pool, and then the costs go way up because everybody's using the services. You need everyone, people who are using services and people not currently using services, in the same pool, or else it doesn't work. So if you're not familiar with that, look up insurance death spiral. You need everybody in the same pool. You can either get everybody in the same pool there's a couple of ways. The easiest way is just make it national, and then literally everyone is included in the same risk pool. But anyway, so this Medicare for all who want it, it's not good, and that probably wouldn't work over time. Again, Medicare for all would be the simplest thing, but since Bernie Sanders rolled over for his good friend Joe, no one has fucking mentioned Medicare for all at all. So that was another reason why Bernie dropping out the way that he did fucked us all over, was he was at least keeping a foot in the door to cable news and keeping that alive in the public consciousness. And after he dropped out, literally Medicare for all has not been spoken again on cable news, and is dropped out of household discussion then basically 24 hours after he rolled over for his good friend Joe. But anyway, Biden's for public option. Of course, he wasn't going to actually agitate for it. He wasn't going to really, campaign for it. But he could at least have fought to keep the COVID health emergency going so that the Medicaid expansions could, get what you can get at least. For fuck's sake. He wouldn't even fight for that. And you can say, oh, well, the Republicans, they're in charge. And why are they in charge? Why did they make the gains that they made in the midterms? Because the Democrats aren't doing fucking anything for anybody, except for the 1% which owns their party. All right, anyway. Let's see what else is going on in the chat here. Continuing. I narrowly avoided my boss creating a huge clusterfuck at work this morning, so that was, quote, good. Congrats. And I'm glad you got through the floppy disks. I was eagerly awaiting that. Kept me up at night. I just finished Black Shirts. Well, you said red shirts and black shirts. Do you mean black shirts and reds? We have that on the channel. It is good. Yeah. Is it one fish, two fish, red fish, black fish? I don't know. Sorry for the dead air here. I'm just trying to find another comment. I hate Twitch's chat feature on mobile, at least. Well, I don't know. This is, I started doing stream. People sometimes ask, why don't you do these on YouTube? And I started streaming on Twitch last year. We're at live stream number 93 now. Because I was looking at Twitch as a possible backup to YouTube. And then just, there's like terms and conditions of becoming a Twitch associate, which allows you to actually do uploads, which I just didn't really want to get involved with. Yet I kind of got used to, by the time I made that decision, I had already gotten used to streaming on Twitch, and now I know the system here, and at least for the time being, I'm going to keep using this. Also, the size of the chat is usually pretty good. I don't know if I did this on YouTube, if we would get like flooded with people, but I like actually being able to respond to people in the discussion. I just got my mic and recording software set up yesterday. I'm going to start recording my reading sessions of Szymanski's works because I can't find any free audiobooks of them. Well, good. I'm always happy to see, you know, more people doing content. Let's build this movement strong and educate people. Send me a link to your channel when you get it going. Apparently there's been a bunch of dead squirrels in New Orleans. I wonder if it is the East Palestine, Ohio fallout running downstream. Yeah, I don't know. By the way, Status Quo covered it. I saw it on Twitter as well. So the bomb truck in East Palestine that you know, had all the horrific chemical fire that's poisoning all the people in the town there. They had dump trucks full of the contaminated soil. It was like 40,000, I forget even what it was. It was a very large amount of soil. Anyway, I don't even know how to explain this, but one of the trucks carrying the soil to wherever it was going to be stored or decontaminated or whatever had an accident where the truck capsized, like it turned over and spilled all the soil. I'm sorry, but to me that seems like just salt in the wound. Like, what are the odds of that actually happening? To me, it just seems like they're just laughing in our faces. And to me, what are the odds of that happening? They fucking deliberate, like the when that derailed train with all the hazmat stuff in East Palestine was detonated. They did it on purpose. That was like, it didn't just catch and explode like that. It was set to do that. And, you know, because they thought it'd be like easier and they would get the, you know, it just make everything happen faster and spend less money. Well, then the contaminated soil truck, quote, derails. I mean, it was on the road. It was not a train. But like, I'm sorry, what are the fucking odds of that? Weird shit going on out there. Weird shit. And just horrific. So, but yeah, I hadn't heard about the squirrels. There was also a gigantic chemical plant fire, I want to say in Virginia. Let me, I have it in my Twitter feed here somewhere. Let me just scroll back and get that. It's worth mentioning. Just unbelievable. Kind of a lot of stuff happened this week. There was a woman at an Austin, Texas airport, 71 years old, deaf woman. The police like arrested her. I have no idea even why. There's a tweet from Breakthrough News. An elderly deaf woman had her arm broken from harsh handcuffing in an Austin, Texas jail. Karen McGee, 71, missed her flight because her hearing aids weren't working. Police were called and she thought they were taking her to a new flight. Instead, they took her to jail. I'm still like, what? Why did the airline clerk people, why did they call the police? She's a 71. Like this, so and she was just sitting there like she missed her plane. The hell is going on? But this is what happens when you get cops involved in things, is they just bring violence. Like that's what happens. So keep cops out of it. They're very likely to escalate situations into violence. Anyway, they broke her arm during the handcuffing. She's 71 years old. You know, people's bones are not always as strong at that age. They only gave her a leave, like over-the-counter pain reliever. She was in jail for 3 days. They only gave her a leave. That was like her only medical attention. And crazy stuff. Karen McGee, MCGEE. So that happened. Looking for this other thing. The fucking Dalai Lama thing. Oh, Dalai Lama doing sexual abuse of a minor on camera. Disgusting. Like, really, really disgusting. I can't even watch that video. Where did I put this? Oh, I know where it is. I know where it is. It was not in a top tier thing. It was in a comment. Come on. There we go. Okay. Yeah, it was a truck carrying 40,000 pounds of toxic soil, was involved in a crash and overturned in Ohio's Columbiana County. At a minimum, you know, this is what happens in a deregulated economy. Just unreal. So then somebody replied, Horace replied, massive industrial fire prompts evacuation order in eastern Indiana. So not Virginia, Indiana. Oh, I know why. Because it's Richmond, Indiana. That's, I think, why I thought Virginia. Let me get a picture of this here, because this is crazy. Let me put this up on the screen. So Richmond, Indiana, people were evacuated for, you know, like a mile around. I mean, to me, a mile seems like not enough. The way that this thing looks. Let's get it up on the screen here. And then to give you some idea of how bad just the Ohio thing was, we actually have a follow-up story I'll do right after this. So there's a picture of the Richmond, Indiana thing. You can see like things that are the size of houses, and then how big that chemical fire is in comparison to that. We gotta, you know, the neoliberal slogan, and we're now like 45 years into it, is defund, deregulate, privatize. Whatever order you want to, privatize, deregulate, and then you defund the public programs. This is where we're ending up with all of this. It's just completely unrestrained capitalism. Now, any capitalism is not the thing that we want, but when it's completely unregulated, it is particularly bad. So this is the neoliberal counter-revolutionary project to you know, attack social democracy such as it was in the United States. Far from perfect or even very good. But they even started getting rid of that in the 80s and 90s up through today. And now we got a country that is basically burning to the ground and choking on toxic smoke in the process. So I mentioned this at the end of the last stream, and I didn't have time to fully get into it. But this was a CNN article. CDC team... Okay, so they're doing the headline, like chopping out all the articles thing, but the CDC team that was studying the health impacts of the East Palestine, Ohio train derailment literally got sick while they were there investigating. So 7 U.S. government investigators fell ill in March, like basically from exposure to, now could it be a coincidence? Yeah, I guess so, but very unlikely coincidence that they happened to get sick, all of them, when they were investigating the environmental health disaster here. So this is the CNN article, and even so, sorry, that was very disorienting. 7 U.S. government investigators briefly fell ill in early March while studying the possible health impacts of a toxic train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. The U.S. Centers for Disease confirmed to CNN on Thursday. The investigators' symptoms included sore throats, headaches, coughing, and nausea, consistent with what some residents experienced after the February 3rd train derailment that released a cocktail of hazardous chemicals into the air, water, and soil. So it's actually kind of a long article. In the interest of time, I'm not going to do it all, but I wanted to bring that back up. That's how bad it was. The people who just were there briefly to investigate got sick. Again, Status Quo has had people out there on the ground covering that. So, yeah, anyway, good on them for doing some actual journalism in an age where that just seems to be a, I don't know, do people do that kind of just free-form investigative journalism anymore? I don't know. All right, back to the chat. Gonna quit my job in 2 days, joining in on the clock today. 2 pay cuts, reduced hours, and tone policing while my water is full of lead and I'm short on rent. Fuck this shit. I'm sorry, and may you find a new job soon. The only thing worse than having a job is looking for one. So, solidarity. Brief story for the stream. Tried to quit my job. The leadership and owner took me to lunch and begged me for 3 hours until I caved and stayed, but I feel defeated. Did you get at least some concessions? It's a trade and I make decent money, but fuck, it wears on the body. Well, that sucks. I hope you at least got something out of it, because now you are in an awkward position, because you kind of, you did give up that power. I'm not trying to be like overly critical. I'm just assessing, like, yeah, you're in a slightly weaker position now than you were before. So, I'm not sure what the next move is. I don't have enough details on that, but do be careful where you go from here and the next moves you make, as far as just the on-the-job politics. How would you respond to people who say the USA isn't technically fascist? There's no technical definition of fascism, first of all. There's a lot of people who will deny fascism unless it is specifically wearing, Nazi armbands or something. But fascism is, we have a long playlist about fascism, actually. One of the things I would point people to is a Politsturm article called The Class Nature of Fascism. And let me just make sure that's what it is. Yeah, The Class Nature of Fascism, us.politsturm.com/the-clash- I'm trying to do a tongue twister, but yeah, The Class Nature of Fascism. Fascism is the ideology of imperialism, and it is what emerges out of that consolidation of capital into the military-industrial complex, and so on. It has particular features, the ultranationalism, and so forth. But it particularly, like in fascist Italy the first time in the 1920s, fascism was developed and launched as kind of a fake socialism, as a decoy socialism, counter-revolution in disguise. In other words, they would borrow from socialist, communist aesthetics and rhetoric and slogans, but then they would twist it so that the actual content of it was counter-revolutionary, not revolutionary. That to me is like, if you're trying to identify is this, fascist or not, is it sounding loud and angry and, would-be revolutionary, like, let's get something done, and so on, but then the content of it is actually conservative, for the status quo, and so on. That tends to be like, how do you recognize fascism at a glance? There are other sorts of analyses you can do of it, but that to me is sort of the essence. It's just loud, angry conservatism that is particularly anti-communist. It comes out during times of crisis and stress for capitalism, particularly when the working class is, quote, in danger of becoming revolutionary. So it's a kind of fake revolutionary movement that the capitalists put out, and not all the capitalists like the brutality of fascism, but 99 out of 100 of them will support fascism rather than losing capitalism to socialism. So, this is that saying, scratch a liberal and a fascist bleeds. Fascism is capitalism under stress, under crisis, and particularly under threat of socialism. It's not a threat to us, it's a threat to the people who run the system. So again, there will be a few liberals who will turn class traitor and they will back socialism rather than fascism. However, there are very, very few. The overwhelming majority of capitalists will, no matter how distasteful they find it, they'll support that fascism in the end. They might have disagreements about how permissive to be for how long and how much defense does the system need at this point. But bottom line is they're not going to lose the system for anything, no matter how many people they got to put in camps or whatever. No matter how many people need to be gunned down by unaccountable police gangs in the streets. They want that system to go on, and if they have to murder innocent people to do it, history shows that's what they'll do. It's happening now. But there is a process, fascization. It doesn't all happen at once overnight. It doesn't drop into your lap overnight. But we're now 20 years after the Patriot Act and all of that. Come on. Anybody saying the U.S. isn't fascist or hides behind qualifiers is in denial. I would agree. The denial is pretty strong. I've been talking about fascism for a long time. People are finally starting to listen to it more. But even in the 2000s, like Bush and Cheney, a lot of what they rolled out was unprecedented and represented a significant stepping up of the fascization process. Even then, a lot of people didn't want to hear it. Oh no, the pendulum's going to swing back, all this other denial shit. Well, look at where we are. There was no pendulum swing with Obama, and there's not one with Biden either. So this goes in one direction. It's that ratchet effect, The Republicans move things to the right, then the Democrats keep it where it is and block movement to the left. It's kind of a boomer meme, but honestly, it's accurate. The U.S. is also, we're not having this discussion. The U.S. is a fucking Nazi empire at home and acts like it abroad, too. Yeah. Yeah, it's time to just, take that fascism denial and just throw it in the bin. Let's move on from fascism denial. How does that sound? We're trying to overcome COVID denial. We're trying to overcome climate denial. Let's overcome fascism denial. How does that sound? I'd be happy to get behind that. I plan on taking the Marx survey you posted when I get off work tonight. I was also wondering if I could send you the report I wrote up on my experience organizing in a yellow union. Yeah, I would love to hear it. Sure. The COVID streams have been super helpful in keeping up to date on everything. Yeah, I kind of let that slide the last couple of months. It honestly gets depressing too. But I do want to, the next few weeks, take the Thursdays to cover, maybe 10 COVID articles in the stream. What does a post-revolution globe look like? We don't know yet. I mean, even at its peak in the first wave of socialist revolution, it did not cover a majority of the planet, so we don't know yet. I think that we're currently building toward a second wave. Socialist revolution, just like capitalist revolution, it doesn't happen all at once everywhere. And there are setbacks, and, the capitalists set up their system, and it was a new way of doing things. And there were various successes and various failures. And the same is true, of socialism as well. When any new mode of production comes in that is revolutionary, it doesn't happen everywhere all at once, and it's not a linear process. If you're interested in that, there is an audiobook, just a recent one from 2 weeks ago. Maurice Cornforth on the Theory of the Socialist Revolution talks about that. I mean, he's not the only Marxist that has talked about that, but we did just put up an audiobook on that if you want to listen to it. My chat is kind of glitching a little. All right. Come on. Chat is not behaving. I do not know why. All right. Got it back again. If anyone is going to be in Sacramento in June, the Brown Berets National Gathering is going to be happening on the 24th. All right, thank you for the announcement. I'm not that familiar with them, but here. Let's take a look. Okay, yeah, got started in the late 60s, modeled after the Black Panther Party. There you go. Is Grover Furr a good historian? I read in a bunch of places that he is a bad historian. Well, I have not undertaken an extensive review of Grover Furr's works. I have heard a few interviews and like lectures given by him, and what he described in his work on Stalin is, I mean, not a bad approach in that what he did was track down the footnotes and citations that are supposed to be supporting various claims about Stalin. And he says, and I have not read his work extensively, so I can't really give my opinion on it. But what he says is that, he's gone through most of the major works that really sort of eviscerate Stalin's legacy. And when you track down the citations that are supposedly the evidence backing the various claims, negative claims made about Stalin, every last one of them unequivocally and without exception is wrong, false, or, the citation doesn't say what the author making the claim says it says. So I don't know, because I haven't gone through it. But that's what he says he took as his method in a lot of places. I don't know. I think that there are some things about Stalin-era USSR that were not perfect and that people should be critical about. I think that the main thing keeping the USSR alive and continuing to construct socialism, that succeeded, and I think that that was not a given that it was going to succeed. So to that extent, you can definitely defend the legacy of Stalin. Did everything that happened during that time, was it the absolute best of all possible worlds? I don't think Stalin would tell you that it was the best of all possible worlds. In fact, I was just asking the Twitter audience if people had any books or articles, sources on the how and why of Lysenko getting promoted as much as he did. Lysenkoism was not good science, and there's like a revival in conservative modern Russia of Lysenkoism, and this is yet more signs that it was very backwards. So during the late 30s there was a number of things in the scientific realm that got suppressed, and then politics really started to dominate science for a while. This was one of the reasons for, in China, they eventually sort of learned from that lesson and then went more hands-off with letting scientists decide science rather than politicians deciding science. So I think that that was one thing that you could definitely be critical of. Again, though, they kept the thing together and they kept building socialism. So anyway, I'm kind of doing a little bit of research on that right now. As far as Grover Furr, I don't know. If people want to give other thoughts on it, I'm welcome to. I welcome you to do that, but. I got my second Novavax, and if you've been avoiding boosters because of bad reactions, it's worth trying to get it. I told them I was unvaccinated, so I got 2 full doses a month apart. That's what a lot of people have been doing with the Novavax. So if people aren't familiar, the Novavax COVID vaccine is not an mRNA vaccine. And people have been going to like different states because of this. The U.S. states don't generally share vaccine databases with each other. So people, if they're near like a state line, will go into another state and do exactly what that commenter is saying. I have heard a lot of good things and read good research about Novavax, that it's one of the strongest vaccines with the fewest amount of bad reactions. Like, I think among the mRNA, what I've seen is that the Moderna is generally the best shot, the fewest amount of adverse reactions, and sort of the best, immune response and the best protection. But the Novavax, which has been all but buried in the United States, and it's still not approved as a second booster shot. You can only get it as your primary and your first booster, at least as of the last time I looked, like very recently. The U.S. has really been dragging its feet on Novavax, and it seems to be a very good, if not a better vaccine than the mRNA ones. The mRNA ones do what they do, but again, all of these, including the Novavax, they do fade. But the Novavax seems like it would be a better, if we really are going to a system where people just get one booster shot a year and then just let the thing spread unchecked, Novavax would probably be a better one. But again, that's not really, even that's not a real solution. The vaccines are your plan B. Plan A is not getting COVID. Don't get SARS-2 in your body. That's plan A. So that's masking, avoiding crowds, and all of the other stuff so that you don't get virus in your system. That's the main thing. Plan B is your vaccines, and yeah, you want the strongest one. So anyway, I've heard the same thing about Novavax, very few adverse effects to it. Trusting science by the Democrats was always less important than following corporate profits. Absolutely. Joe Biden and the Democrats are the nothing is wrong party. Nothing to see here. Go home, concerned citizens. I hate it. Yeah, Democrats are fucking terrible. I'm wondering if we can trigger out any lurking Democrats in the chat here so we can ban them. No, but seriously, if you're thinking about making comments in defense of Joe Biden, please do not bother. But wait, we can push Biden left. Yeah, I did videos on that back in 2020. How's that been working out for people? Yeah, and as the Democrats say, we need a strong Republican Party with more reasonable people like Mitt Romney. Yeah, no. See, that's the thing. The Democrats, they'll be like, the Republican Party is turning fascist. And then they'll be like, we need a strong Republican Party. No. So the Democrats and Republicans are owned by the same people. Okay, if you go to opensecrets.org, look at the top. We did this in a previous live stream. You look at the top 10 Democrats and the top 10 Republicans. They're funded by almost the exact same industries. There's like a couple of minor differences, but the top 30 industries are like 27 of them are the same pretty much. And the top 10 is almost identical. It's real estate, it's banking, it's medical industry. The parties are owned by the same basic interests. And what those interests do not want is an independent, working class led left emerging. They want their two sock puppets to be the entire focus of discussion, this fake political discourse that's going on between Democrats and Republicans. It's completely a controlled debate. There's no real independence of thought within it. Again, both parties and their political lines are bought and paid for by the 1%. So we need to build that left. And the Democrats, they can go on with their fake anti-fascism. Like, oh no, Trump's a fascist, we got to do... Why is the Republican Party even so big? Because you, Democrats, stand in the way on behalf of the people who fund you of doing anything meaningful against the Republicans. And that's why for the last 20 years, power has just been seesawing back and forth between these two parties as one is slightly more hated than the other this election cycle, and then the other one becomes slightly more hated this election cycle, but everyone hates them both. And nobody's happy except for the very rich. So, the Democrats, if they were for real, would ally with the left, stamp the Republicans out of existence. by partnering on a broad slate of popular reforms. And you still have to fight for it a little bit, but I mean, people want change overwhelmingly in a broad array of areas, and the Democrats won't do it. You know, it's like that thing of like, whoever gives health care to people in the United States, you know, probably doesn't have to worry about re-election for the next 30 years. But they won't do it, and why? It's the people who fund and control them. Oh, thank you for the Lysenko article. Biden's public option is for thousands of people to die and become disabled every week. Yeah. Has anyone else read The People's Republic of Walmart? I think I have a copy of that even. I just finished it and it was somewhat informative, but it jumps around a lot and I never got into the details. And then it does anti-communist shit. Yeah, I mean, this is the standard thing to expect with any kind of, you know, the U.S. left tends to be deeply anti-communist. Something we're trying to change, and hopefully, you know, we use the Revolution 2030 hashtag that signifies the concept that if we push hard through the 2020s, we may finally have, you know, more of, we may have broken through that long-standing anti-communism to have a moment for Marxism by 2030. That's the idea. I do see, and by the way, there's still a long way to go, but I do see progress in that already. So, is The Origin of the Family and Private Property on the channel? No, it is a very long book. I think the audiobook works out to like 9 or 10 hours. I have a lot of stuff I want to do first. We will be doing it, but not for a little while. For anyone who saw Family over the weekend, how did it end up going for you? My younger brother and I seemingly burned a bridge over the dumbest shit. Whoever the trans person is that's now on the beer cans, somehow being a ploy to brainwash people into being trans. I'm sorry, if all it takes for you to become trans is to see a trans person on a beer can, maybe like you're not that secure in your identity. Like maybe your entire foundation of your personality, like you don't know who you are. And you know what? If people want to, you know, people are not sure what they want to do and they want to experiment with, you know, gender bending, like whatever it is, expressing yourself differently with regard to your gender, like go for it. There should be support for that, not hostility and bigotry. But what I'm saying is, like, it doesn't actually work like that. Like, putting the face of someone on a beer can is not mind control. You know what I mean? And if things on beer cans actually affect you that strongly, you have a problem. So anyway, and then also something about how COVID is a bioweapon from China. Yeah. No. So does your brother mask about, does your brother mask against COVID? Because this is what I find is the people who are like, oh, it's a bioweapon, but then also we shouldn't do anything about it. Those are contradictory positions. I don't know if people can understand that. But yeah, the conservative sort of simulated violence against beer cans, or actual violence, simulated violence against trans people using beer cans as an effigy. That's disgusting and horrifying, and it shouldn't be allowed. So, you know, this is why we did the stream that we did on transgender basics, to just educate people, like people who've never, don't really know anything about this at all. It's pretty simple. There's nothing to be afraid of. People who do not express the gender identity that is socially mandated for their sex, they're just no threat to anyone. You know what I mean? It's like you just relax. There's no reason for panic whatsoever. And if you're, you know, content with yourself, you should be content with other people too. Again, there's nothing really to fear here. And you should ask yourself, why are the most conservative, most reactionary elements in the U.S. ruling class trying to push this hatred against trans people so hard. And I would suggest to you that it is the spearhead of a broader assault against the working class. So if you buy into this, next it's going to be the next marginalized group, and then another, and then another, and then another, and then they're going to come for you, and there will be no one left. Almost like it's that poem all over again. First they came, and then in the end there was no one left to speak for you. But no, you don't think that that's going to happen, because you have a fucking walnut for a brain. And, look, if you don't want to be that person, then don't be that person. Stop being such a fucking gullible rube. Stop falling for every reactionary ploy that gets, put out there on Fox News. And the point there is trans people exist. So once in a while, there's going to be a trans person's face on a beer can. Live with it. Most of the time, it's not a trans person. But trans people exist. Just fucking deal. That is what all of this comes down to. Trans people exist. Relax. Trans people exist. Deal with it. Trans people exist. They're not coming to, kill you in your sleep. They just want to exist. All right? Relax. That's the message. So this is talking about the Dalai Lama from before. Any hierarchical religion with a living God at the top is going to inspire abuse when there's no accountability or method of dissent. Yeah, Luna Oi was posting about that, and then there was a really good follow-up post, which let me see if I can get it out, explaining the sort of connection between that and extreme reactionaries, and specifically esoteric fascists. Let's see what we have here. Oh, yeah. So Luna had a post from April 11. As the true history of the Dalai Lama is gaining traction in the West, it's important to recognize the dialectic between cults, anti-communism, and fascism. QAnon, the LaRouche cult, Falun Gong, the Three Stripe cult of Grand Imperial Duke Emperor. The list goes on. The reason is simple. Michael Parenti defined fascism as pseudo-revolution based on irrational mass appeals in order to serve the interests of the ruling class. That's basically what I was saying before. It's, it takes the appearance of revolution, but in content it's counter-revolutionary. The heavy emphasis on irrationality, for sure. And ultimately, it just ends up serving the interests of the status quo, the ruling class. So fascism as pseudo-revolution based on irrational mass appeals to serve the interests of the ruling class. These characteristics mirror cults. The cross-suitability is apparent. Fascism also developed to oppose communism. So ideologically, the dialectic is clear. Materially, cults are exploitative and opportunistic by nature. They take advantage of whoever they can take advantage of. Materially, bourgeois states and media have shown great willingness to give resources and broad public platforms to anyone who happens to be anti-communist. This gives cults a huge material incentive to be anti-communist. Study the relationships and the development of cults, fascism, and anti-communism, and the intersections become obvious. The suitability becomes clear, and a deeper understanding of all three phenomena emerges. And then Luna retweeted a good thread from Logka11, Logka11, thread, the Dalai Lama is a demon. And they talk about the history of Tibet prior to being liberated. And it was a brutal and corrupt theocracy where 95% of the population were slaves or serfs. The 5% elite were monks, landlords, and aristocrats. And horrific, brutal life there. Then there was another tweet from at AskViraTTV. Esoteric fascists' intense fascination with Tibetan Buddhism in general, and the Lama system in particular, is actually very simple. They love the idea that a chosen few could be perpetually reincarnated. They love the idea that a chosen few could be perpetually reincarnated as immortal priest kings with absolute dominion over a population of slaves. So yeah, for people not that familiar with, esoteric Buddhism and things like that, it's Yeah, but this might be going over your head, but the connections are definitely there. You know, anybody who's studied religion will have some familiarity with that at least. How can anyone be a liberal or a libertarian in the wake of this gross class warfare that is so obviously for profit-based destruction of health and life, as is the case in these chemical and environmental disasters? It's disgusting. Yeah, I agree. I mean, how can anyone be a libertarian? Talk to a libertarian, you'll find out why. These people are incapable of critical thought. I don't know how many times I've talked to libertarians and like, you're pointing out directly triple underlining in bright red the logical inconsistency in what they're saying, and they just refuse to see it. They have something at stake in the system, and they're willing to go to any irrational length to deny what's right in front of them. It's the bottom line. You can only do so much with people like that. But again, we're just talking about the irrational component of fascism. And I would say also willful ignorance. You know, that's part of that self-hoodwinking, the deliberate irrationality. It's key in the, you know, the fascist meltdown of reason that builds to the frenzy that, you know, can escalate into a genocide or something like that. Something that's just absolutely stripped of any basic common decency. You have to get very steeped and twisted into that irrational headspace to support it. So, I don't know. I think that's my answer. Isn't the dollar becoming unstable or losing popularity as the global standard? I mean, the U.S. is not popular generally. The U.S. gives people bad deals when it comes to development. China has been able to get a leg up, particularly in Africa and other places, by just offering deals that aren't completely shit like the U.S.'s is. It may not be socialist. I mean, sometimes they do forgive the loans and things like that, so they turn into grants. Sometimes they don't. It's undoubtedly, even like from a capitalist perspective, for a country trying to develop and seeking a partner to fund it in terms of supplying the capital to develop, China's giving a better deal than the U.S., which is, again, easy. The U.S. gives absolutely terribly exploitative deals. Look up the history of IMF debt traps and things like that. There's a ton that has been written on it for decades. And then the U.S. gets mad and it's like, China's trying to take over the world. Yeah, China is trying to take over the world. Like, you haven't been doing that like forever. See, it's just the U.S. considers it its birthright to do that. But then when somebody else does it, it's, you know, oh, they're trying to take over. That's rightfully ours, you know. So, yes, many countries, like with good reason, would rather not partner with the U.S. because they know that they're going to get fucked over. And then if they violate any of the terms of the lease or anything, the U.S. has absolutely no problem doing military interventions or, you know, any kind of just they're gonna get their money back one way or another. They don't care if you have to starve your people to do it. They're going to get their money back. And anybody that offers a system that is just not that bad is going to be more popular than that. So doesn't make it socialism necessarily, but it, you know, it's a better deal under the capitalist system. So as far as, you know, there's this sort of narrative going about that the dollar is about to be overthrown. That may be. Again, that doesn't make it socialism. It just means that there may be a shifting in where the money power makes its home base, and people should be, you know, would be well advised to make the distinction between a proletarian class revolution that would be leading to socialism and just a shifting of capital's, you know, strongest bases in the world. All right, so I want to emphasize that point. Now, it just came out that China just made a major deal to stop trading in dollars with some of their large trading partners. So, you know, my understanding is that every time that this has happened in the past, it is followed quickly by U.S. military action. So we'll see what happens in this case. China may be too big for the U.S. to do that, but that the U.S. is going to try everything that they possibly can to stop it. Now, we're not into just lesser evilism here. You know, the idea is class struggle. Because once you get to the highest stage of capitalism, it is imperialism. And just capitalism needs to keep expanding. Capitalism by its nature is exploitation, and it needs to keep expanding or else it dies. How does it die? It dies by getting overthrown by the class the class whose exploitation it relies on. So there's no capitalism without a proletariat to exploit. That's, you know, where the surplus value comes from. That's how capitalists get rich. So as long as there is capitalism, there is a class being exploited by capital. And if it doesn't keep expanding, the profitability falls into jeopardy, and eventually it gets overthrown. So, you know, there's a lot of lesser evil narratives that still end up being capitalist, that may be trying to sell themselves as socialist. I would just really, really caution people to be wary of that. Hello from a French Marxist. Well, hello to you. Why aren't you out protesting? No, we've discussed the French protests a lot, and everyone has very high hopes. France is a country that does take to the streets. Hopefully this is tied in with organized parties and unions sufficiently to the point where this can grow. Boy, do we need you know, a Western advanced country revolution. That would be tremendous. You know, of course, famously Marx and Engels predicted that the first socialist revolutions would happen in the most advanced countries. What's actually happened is that revolution tends to happen around the periphery where capitalism is weaker. So, you know, it is what it is, but still be incredible to see, you know, a far left movement gain a lot of strength in France, for sure. Actually, along those lines, there's something else I wanted to mention, and it was like in my head and right out of my head again. Well, we're going to have to come back to that because I forget what I was going to say. But yes, hello to you in France. Regarding status quo, you don't need an Ivy League education to do journalism. You just have to get out there, ask people questions, and, you know, talk to your neighbors. Absolutely, absolutely. You'd be amazed the information that is out there. If only, I mean, really, what the mass media is there to do is to take the spotlight off of the information all around us and just put it onto particular topics. So yeah. Have you ever heard of Revolutionary Left Radio? A few months ago, they did an episode explaining how there is some overlap between Marxism and Buddhism. I don't really listen to a lot of other, you know, YouTube or podcasts. I just don't really have time. Most of it's going, you know, I see what I see on Twitter because that's a very rapid fire thing. Otherwise, I don't often have a lot of time because I'm just researching things directly for this show or doing readings or people send me links or whatever. I did not see that show. I would not say that there's major overlap between Marxism and Buddhism, particularly anyway. I mean, I am somewhat familiar with Buddhism, and I think that some of the ideas in Buddhism are inspiring and noble and, you know, have influenced me personally to some extent. To me, it seems like there's, specifically in the realm of dialectical thinking, there's probably more in common with Taoism, which you could say that there is some overlap in terms of influence with Buddhism there a long, long time ago. Every time I read Mao's work on dialectical materialism, I just always think of Taoism. And, you know, these things are not all one way. There's different schools and there's different branches. Like, you can get into some, like, esoteric Taoism that has really sort of wacky and not great theories about, like, the spiritual structure of the universe or whatever. And then there's other kinds of, like, more, I don't know, casual, informal Taoism that's just more about sort of like living in harmony with nature and the seasons and things like that. So it's not all one way, and people should understand that. I don't know what else to say about that specifically, but yeah, Marxism and Buddhism, I'm not entirely sure about that. But in any case, I mean, Marxism is not based on asceticism, and there's like fundamental things in Buddhism about trying to extinguish desire so as to stop reincarnating. And I mean, there's nothing to do with that whatsoever in Marxism at all. So yeah, I don't know about that. But then again, I didn't hear the episode, so I can't really critique it. Off the top of my head, I would not say that there are dramatic parallels that like sort of leap out at me. I don't know, maybe somebody could sell me on that, but I'm not sure I have a need to. But the other thing is any of these religious or spiritual ideas, if they're sort of practiced in the abstract on an individual basis, there can be some liberating components of it, like just keeping it going about Buddhism, not being chained to your desires in such a way that they cause you suffering, but like trying to let go of some of your attachments and things like that, to the extent that these things actually do blind you to what's really important in life. Okay, that's probably a good thing and not such a harmful thing. When they get used as ruling class ideology, which is pretty much inevitable when they get promoted on a mass scale by the ruling class, there's going to be elements put in there, or at least interpretations put in, that serve to keep, well, in that case, feudalism going and things like that. So anyway, I mean, this is kind of the case in the different eras of modes of production. The slave society, feudal society, capitalism. There are sort of changes in ruling class ideology, which are also reflected in the religious sphere as well. So can't go into that too much more right now, but there's a few thoughts. My senior dad acts like you need to be goose-stepping and hating Jewish people to be a fascist. It's ridiculous to say the least. Yeah, so your older dad there has been sold on a very narrow idea of what fascism is, which doesn't allow him to recognize actual, neo-fascism right in front of him today. Fascism takes many forms, and it's not tied to just those forms. Question to the French comrade about how is the revolution going? Basically, is it looking properly leftist or what's going on there? Okay, so the person who got sort of their arm twisted into coming back to work, my employer claimed I would make better money with modifications they have made to pay structure, and they alluded to a position in leadership opening up. Man, don't fall for that. I mean, if you want to do something else and you've got a clear shot at it, listen to that. I mean, let me put it this to you, mouth fail. Let me put it to you this way. How long, even with those changes, before you start feeling this way again? And, if it can make the difference for you, then fine. But if it's not going to make the difference for you, you're going to wind up back in the situation again eventually. My problem is that I already spent 4 years launching a new branch for them out of state, where due to my supervisor getting a DUI and unable to fulfill responsibilities, did all the management responsibilities with no pay raise, with a decent salary, but not what I should have been getting, considering all of the roles I was handling. I know it's fucked up. Yeah, I mean, well, I've asked you the question I would ask you, which is how long before you feel this way again, and is there a better option that you can pursue? Oh, as a shorthand, yeah, there's certain fascist buzzwords you can identify, like globalist. The use of globalist does not mean that they are completely steeped in fascism. It means that they've been exposed to some fascist rhetoric. And so they've picked up on the use of at least that term. Because to be fair, fascist media outlets, they say globalist a lot. So even if you were to listen to like a couple of hours of it, you could end up picking up that term. So just the use of globalist does not mean that they're deeply educated in fascism, but it, probably does indicate some exposure. Yeah, I'm going to echo some other commenters. Konnichiwa, you should maybe post a little less because you're, some of your comments are okay, and some of them are really irritating a lot of the commenters and me for kind of good reason. You maybe should stand back and lurk a little bit more. All right. Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to give you a timeout for the rest of the day for real fascists would put trans people in death camps. Well, we're already at the stage where trans people are 4 times more likely to experience violent victimization than non-trans people. So maybe you should shut the fuck up for a while, because I don't think you know what you're talking about, but you're talking anyway. So I'll let you back in at the end of the day, but you should listen when people are telling you to slow your roll. From my understanding, Lysenkoism was just epigenetics in its infancy. No, 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 no. No, it was a lot more than that. Yeah, I agree with that. You could call it proto-fascism prior to Bush Cheney. And especially, even during Bush Cheney, you didn't quite have the mass movement yet. But now, with the Tea Party, which was the end of Bush and Cheney, with the Tea Party, birtherism, MAGA, you absolutely have the mass movement component of fascism. Yeah, it's fascism. It hasn't completely taken over every aspect of life yet, but like, the idea is we stop it before it gets to that point. Of course, the Democrats will literally be standing in the way of that happening on behalf of the people funding them, but yeah, we're only 93% of the way towards fascism, so it's not as bad actually. No, let's not do that. Let's not do that. And then you have the CPUSA saying that there's small d Democrats. You can't fucking make that shit up. No further comment. All right. Right-wing YouTuber in his truck wearing sunglasses and a baseball hat, video title, "My beer can made me trans." That is so, oh, I'm writing that down. My beer can made me trans. I'm using that. Get out there and use it before I do, but I'm definitely using that. Jakar, that is it. Nope, my brother doesn't mask at all, yet still thinks that COVID is somehow a bioweapon. Okay, that makes your brother an idiot. Hate to say it, but that means that your brother is incapable of having logically consistent positions. It's a bioweapon. Breathe deeply. It's a bioweapon, and I'm mad that it's spreading. But no, I don't try not to catch it. Okay, why? Do you not value your health? And if you don't value your health, why are you even upset about the bioweapon? Speaking of Luna Oy, her book is out now, banyanhouse.org. Sweet. Any conversation that includes the U.S. not being fascist ignores the fact that our prison system is just the forced labor camps of old. I mean, and then some. The Dean camps? Oh, death camps already exist. We call them correctional centers. Yeah, I mean, I don't... the missing element would be like the actual, like mass gas chambers, but yeah, I mean, it's because they are, well, anyway, yeah, let's not have this conversation. I agree. Trans people are victims of patriarchal society, just like women. It'll take a lot of struggle to overcome the sexist norms of the patriarchy. Absolutely, and for people who are not clear on the connections between capitalism and patriarchy, and even earlier stages of class society and patriarchy, watch the Marxist Paul video on trans liberation. It's about half an hour long. Could change your life. Like, he did a good job of putting all that stuff together. I don't get how people found Lysenko and decided, oh yeah, that's the only thing I'll know about biology. Absolutely. I mean, I haven't even, yeah, it's pseudoscience. I don't even know, like, well, how it's getting brought back. There's a fascist movement in Russia is how it's getting brought back. And then people like Infracell amplify it for the English-speaking audience. So, yeah. They're not Marxist. They're not trying to be Marxist. They're fascist. And, you know, they're just trying to distort people's understanding of Marxism. Yeah, Lysenkoism is epigenetics like Lamarck's theory is epigenetics. Um, yeah, no, it's one of those things. I remember there was a time where I started, you know, like late in high school, I started reading, you know, controversial stuff and just trying to form my own opinions on it. And I remember picking up a book on creationism, like, you know, if the creationists turn out to make sense, I'll eat my hat. No, I read about 5 pages. It was the fucking most mind-numbing garbage I had ever read. And then I put it down. Some things you really don't need to read much to understand that they're not correct. Yeah, if it were a correctional system, it would be rehabilitational rather than punitive. Good point. All right. Now, we have caught up with the chat. Look at us. And let's get into some articles. So I had the MPOX follow-up thing, which I mentioned at the end of the last video. I have a couple of things there I'm not going to be able to get to. I'll put them in tomorrow's COVID stream. So, you know what? I had, we covered, I think in last Wednesday's stream, some stuff about political dynasties. And I found actually the articles I was really looking for, which included some things like the richest families in Florence, Italy in 1427 are still the richest families in Florence, Italy in the 21st century. Or, you know, the 1% have been running the show for 800 years, things like that. But, I don't know, and I'm torn. Should I follow up with that today? Or, no, we're not. We're not. I'm going to do the Bernie Sanders thing because I saw this and I just really want to cover it because I have a special hate of Bernie Sanders for rallying tens of millions of progressive, change-seeking, advanced masses in the United States and then feeding them into the absolute dead end of the Democratic Party. And he has not self-criticized at all that I've seen. And reading creationist theories like reading bad science fiction. It's worse. Bad science fiction usually is a little entertaining, at least. Anyway, Bernie, yeah, you know, he had this whole line of like, oh, we have to stop Trump. He's still going on with that. Like, look at what's happening under Biden. But no, you think it would be dramatically worse somehow under Trump? No. We need to overcome this like lesser evilism and clinging to the pant leg of the Democratic Party like a shy 3-year-old. Okay? The U.S. working class has to organize independently and fight Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians. This is what needs to happen. All of them represent neoliberalism. So anyway, let's get into Bernie Sanders wrote a book. And the title of the book, I love, although it's definitely misrepresentative of the contents. The book is called It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. And then I would add that the subtitle here should be It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. It's just not okay to do anything effective about it, which is pretty much, I think, sums up Bernie Sanders' position. So he wrote this with John Nichols. I want to read the introduction and one chapter out of this because what the fuck is going on? And, we have to fight this stuff. So this is the table of contents. And the introduction is called Capitalism is the Problem. Except I think you'll find something interesting. Literally every time that he mentions capitalism, he doesn't say capitalism. He says uber capitalism. So those of you in the know will know exactly what this means. It means capitalism with ride sharing. No. It means too much capitalism. It means neoliberalism specifically. It means he's a social democrat that just wants to like regulate capitalism again, and then, you know, problem solved, we can all go back to sleep. No, we had that and it fell apart for various reasons. It succumbed to the neoliberal onslaught, the neoliberal class project in the 1970s that culminated, you know, its first sort of major appearance was the Reagan-Bush years in the 80s. The Morning in America, this was like really the neoliberal vision that was, they were experimenting with it before, but they really unveiled it in full as Reaganism. And that's basically what the social democrats wanted. They just want to go back to like the late 70s, like, or, you know, late social democracy of the 1970s. And don't get me wrong, that would be better than what we have today. But I don't think that's actually the realistic thing that's going to happen. Because look at how the Bernie Sanders campaigns went. Yes, they were popular. People do want change. But we're no more likely to get social democratic reforms through electoralism than anything else. Like, you, literally, to get any of that stuff, you have to push for revolution in the first place. So why don't we just push for revolution in the first place? Because if you start out at this compromised position, you're going to get nowhere in the end. If we push for revolution, we might at least get social democracy, but there's no other way of getting it, which is indeed the history of social democracy in the first place. It's capitalism's response to the USSR and the fear of being completely overthrown. They were like, we need to make our system more stable and permanent. So that's what they tried to do. They would go after individual capitalists to tighten up the overall dictatorship of capital as a class. So they want to save the system by targeting individual, quote, bad apple capitalists. All right, and that's exactly what Bernie's feeding into, because he's not really talking about capitalism. He's talking about too much capitalism, uber capitalism, neoliberal, deregulated capitalism. Anyway, then I also want to look at Chapter 7, Fighting for Our Economic Future, because I think that there's another telling look inside the Bernie brain sort of thought process there. So let's get into this. Where are we? This is screen 3. Capitalism is the problem. They say that the older you get, the more conservative you become. Well, that's not me. The older I get, the angrier I become about the uber-capitalist system under which we live. Oh boy. And the more I want to see transformational change in our country. Some people think that it's un-American to ask hard questions about where we are as a nation and where we're heading. I don't. To my view, there is nothing more American than questioning the systems that have failed us and demanding the changes that we need in order to create the kind of society that we and future generations deserve. Okay, yeah, social change, it's a good thing. But again, uber capitalism. So, I mean, just by way of background, Uber is it's been imported into English, but it is a German prefix. It means over, or like sometimes could be translated into super, you know, like beyond the normal. So that's what he's saying here is like the Uber capitalist system. Oh, we're in like super capitalism now. Well, is the criticism actually of capitalism, or is it just like this extent to which capitalism has now gone? That's, again, one of the things I'd like to focus on here and keep in mind as we proceed, because that is going to give us clues as to where Bernie is leading those foolish enough to keep following him now in 2023. Here is the simple, straightforward reality. The uber-capitalist economic system that has taken hold in the United States in recent years, propelled by uncontrollable greed and contempt for human decency, is not merely unjust, it is grossly immoral. We need to confront that immorality, boldly, bluntly, without apology. It is only then that we can begin to transform a system that is rigged against the vast majority of Americans and is destroying millions of lives. Well, correction, the system isn't rigged against the vast majority of Americans. The system is based on exploiting the vast majority of Americans and when it does that, it is functioning as intended. There's no way of like fixing that and keeping the same system. All right. Confronting that reality and mobilizing people to bring about the transformational change that we need is not easy. That's why I've written this book. Okay. We need not only to understand the powerful forces that hold us down today, but equally importantly, to have a vision as to where we want to be in the future. It is my strong belief that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, with exploding technological progress that will greatly increase worker productivity, we can finally end austerity economics and achieve the long-sought human dream of providing a decent standard of living for all. This is so vague. In the 21st century, we can end the vicious dog-eat-dog economy, in which the vast majority struggle to survive while a handful of billionaires have more wealth than they could spend in 1,000 lifetimes. Okay, but what are you for? That is vague still. The oligarchs own America, taking on the economic and political establishment. Looking for the good stuff here, not the stuff that we've heard like a million times already from Bernie. This is a 500-page book, by the way. So they're talking about the campaign. State after state and in national polls, we won the support of young Americans by landslides. And does he actually go after the Democratic Party for, you want to talk about a rigged system. And he's talking about the Democratic primaries where I took on the party's anointed candidate. Yeah, and then you like backed down at a critical time and didn't lead people into the Greens or a new left party or anything. You kept people in that dead end of a party where it's impossible to win a primary, no matter like what you do. That is why, after I lost the Democratic nomination in 2020, I worked with the progressive movement to do everything we could to defeat Trump and elect Joe Biden as president. And how is that working out? Because he's ending the pandemic like a month even earlier than the too early thing that we were going to have. Do you think it's going well? Because I don't. While Biden and I have very different political views, I have known him for years and consider him to be a friend and a very decent human being. Okay, your credibility is shot. It's fucking 2023. He can't stop jerking Biden off. He can't. I apologize for the vulgar metaphor. But for real, what is he doing here? No one agrees with this. So, anyway, and then he goes on to the why people vote for Trump. I know that some pundits and politicians respond to the questions of why is Trump supported by suggesting that all of Trump's supporters are racists, sexists, and homophobes, that they really are all deplorable and that there's nothing to be done. Sorry, I don't agree, and I should know I have met with many of them. Are some of them racists and sexists who vote for bigotry? Absolutely, but many are not. I think here's what you can cover is who's the Trump base? Racists, sexists, homophobes, other bigots, and then absolutely clueless anti-intellectuals who will not look at the evidence in front of them that, well, first of all, if you're actually not a bigot and you're against bigotry, you would not even consider voting for Trump. So yeah, at a certain point, this becomes that thing of like one Nazi and 11 other people at a table is a dozen Nazis around the table. At a certain point, you see what Trump is about, and it becomes a no-go. It becomes a deal breaker. People for whom Trump's platform and behavior over 4 years isn't a deal breaker means they're okay with all that, and maybe they even like it. Do you see the Trump contingent that's like anti-racists for Trump? No, you don't. If you do, they're like some tiny psyop. So anyway, Bernie, this is the end of the road for Bernie Sanders, I think. I think that the more accurate answer as to why Trump has working class support, he doesn't. Most of his support is not working class. We covered this in a video, I think in 2021. Why did Trump win the working class? By and large, he didn't. There were some working class people who voted for Trump. They were not the majority. Most working class people voted Democrat or didn't vote. And so again, going after the Trump base, this is just not, you don't have to do this. You have to go after the Democratic Party that is standing in the way of the left. It's not like this magic formula of like, how do you win over the MAGA people? You win over the MAGA people by crushing their party and exposing it as the hollow sham that it is, not by sucking up to them. All right? And the Democrats aren't going to do that. They're not going to crack the Republican Party in half and expose it as a hollow sham. They're not going to do that because they're the same fucking thing. They use slightly different rhetoric and they dress it up differently, but they're fundamentally the same in substance. So anyway, talking about these poor Trump voters, these are Americans who, while the rich get much richer, have seen their real wages stagnate and their good union jobs go to China and Mexico, and then they believe every right-wing lie about what's going on. Are you going to address that at some point? They can't afford health care, they can't afford child care, they can't afford to send their kids to college, and are scared to death about a retirement with inadequate income. Because of what doctors call diseases of despair, these communities are even seeing a decline in life expectancy. Many of these voters have spent their lives playing by the rules. They worked hard, very hard, and did their best for their kids and their communities during the worst of the pandemic. They didn't have the luck. Again, these are like the real unsung heroes, according to Bernie, is like the Trump voters. This sucks. This is fucking garbage. I want to read this just to see what he's saying, but then again, I don't want to read it once I hear what he's saying. Many of these so-called racist Americans voted for Barack Obama. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know what to say anymore. This is worse than I was expecting. Let's skip ahead to one of the more, quote, like leftist chapters. I just can't hear any more praise of Trump people. No, that was the next one. Failing to build back better. So again, talking about how Biden has like completely failed, yet this is at odds with the whole Biden's such a great guy and I'm so glad that I supported him, etc. Well, anyway, Bernie is not the leader we need, like at all. Where is chapter 7 actually in here? Would have been good had I actually marked that. I thought I was going to do all of these in order, and then actually I decided to skip the rest of the introduction. But, I mean, he hasn't thrown his hat in the ring yet for the next primary, which is probably a good thing. All right, I think that this is actually in it. I'm just going to stop here. Anyway, he goes into a thing about letting workers form unions and letting workers form co-ops, which basically completely skews the entire understanding people should have about workers taking power. It's not about letting workers form unions. It's about workers organizing in such a way that we seize power and do what we want without anyone letting us do it. That's the idea. Anyway, I thought that I was going to go deeper into the Bernie Sanders book. That was so disgusting, I just don't even want to read it. So anyway, let's go back to the chat for a minute and do have some other things that we can read. Hope S4A didn't pay for this book. You better believe I did not. It smacks of, it's not capitalism you're mad at, it's corporatism, crony capitalism. Ask your doctor if capitalism light is right for you. Absolutely. I mean, I can read more of this if people want, but I was starting to get like mad reading that shit. Speaking of political dynasties, you have Robert F. Kennedy Jr., anti-vax fucking whack job out of running against Biden now, yeah. U.S. politics. Then you got Marianne Williamson on her book tour. Who again, Marianne Williamson will do the same thing about capitalism. She will stump for capitalism all day long, and then, it's whatever version of uber capitalism, super capitalism, late stage capitalism. Like, they think you can go back to, like, middle stage capitalism. Like, that's a thing you can do. You can't. I heard one lefty person, Jason Miles of This Is Revolution, never heard of him, say that the number of oh god, yeah, I'm gonna just leave that for now. Yeah, it's only slavery if it's 51% of the prison population doing labor. I've seen that argument too. That's like, oh, well, workers getting paid like a penny an hour to do work for McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever, like, it's not prevalent enough to be considered slave labor. I don't even know like how big of a paycheck you need from like some corporate think tank to attempt an argument like that, but yeah. I should write a book as a response. It's okay to destroy capitalism. All of Bernie's books read the same way. Well, confession to make, I have not read any of Bernie's other books. Bernie chose Biden over his base. Yeah, I did a video on that like real early. It got people mad. Which is like Bernie cared more about what the 1% thought than what his base thought. Absolutely. Parenti was so right to have fallen out with Bernie Sanders decades ago. Yanis Varoufakis is the only politician that I've seen not supporting his party when it came to austerity measures. He resigned and started his own party. Bernie was, and this was my point back in like 2016 and then again in 2020. Bernie was uniquely positioned to start an actually large non-Democrat, non-Republican party. So currently the largest non-Democrat, non-Republican party is the Libertarian Party, which is crypto-fascist. They're neoliberal, even more so than Democrats or Republicans. So that's your third biggest, alternative, quote unquote. The idea is that there are small left parties. There always have been. Even the Green Party, which I think is the fourth largest party, is left. They don't take the corporate money. There's like a lot of similarities with the Bernie Sanders sort of campaign rules. I would kind of look at the Green Party as like Bernie plus 50%. Bernie Sanders, in other words, kind of like took the Green position and like watered it down some. Anyway, these parties exist. The problem is they never have that real moment where they take off. They need that sort of injection at just the right minute that gives them the turbo boost where they overcome all the inertia that actually turns them into something with, a real presence and staying power. Moments for that to happen do not come around very often. 2016, Bernie Sanders was one of them, and he pissed it away on behalf of us all. Well, not on behalf of us all. On behalf of the Democratic Party, he pissed it away, affecting us all. Sorry, bad misstatement by me. Then again in 2020, he had the opportunity. 2020 was like a hollowed out version of 2016. People sort of already, it had half of the oomph that 2016 had because, some of us had seen this movie before. And it ended even worse in 2020. He didn't even stick out the whole primary. And it was like, oh, the pandemic. Yeah, the pandemic, but is Biden stopping? No, then you can't stop either. But no, of course, it was going to roll over for his good friend Joe. And, he never called Hillary Clinton his good friend. But for some reason, Joe Biden, who might even have worse politics than Hillary Clinton, that's his good friend. And he has to remind you of it almost every time he says the guy's name. Why is that? That's terrible. Anyway, the point is those moments do not come around often. And again, would whatever that party been, would that have been the thing that leads us to revolution? No, but it would have been a very good staging ground for the U.S. left to learn some hard lessons and get a lot of experience, and probably also drive the struggle forward in the meantime. And it would give us just more data to work with about what we need to do next. And it would give many people more data about what to do next, what works and what doesn't. And Bernie couldn't do that. He had to kowtow to the Democrats again. And there hadn't been a chance like that in 50 years to start a left party. He was rallying people by the stadium full, immensely popular. Many people would have, if he had led an exodus from the Democratic Party, would have joined it. We would have had like the beginning of a left party in the United States. To what end, I don't know, but we would have had it. And he just pissed it away because the Democratic Party told him to. Social democracy is like throwing one of their own under the bus to save the whole. Yeah, I mean, the capitalist class thinks like a class. If there are individual capitalists who are threatening things for everyone, for their whole class, then they will, bad appleize them. That's what they're trying to do with Trump, too. Which is not to say, like, the reactionary position is like, and tailist position is like, look, they're going after Trump, it means he's right. No, they're going after Trump because he's, like, jeopardizing their system. He's part of their system. He just happens to be, like, really bad at what he's doing. So he plays this role of a heel. Like, if you watch pro wrestling, he's being a heel. And then they get to, as a class, like, make an example of Trump and then go back to, like, strengthening the dictatorship of capital. Like, you're a chump if your takeaway from that is like, oh, Trump's telling the truth. He's one of the good. He's on our side. No, you idiot. He's a billionaire slumlord. What the fuck is wrong with you? Do the bare minimum challenge, and your opponent is Bernie Sanders' writer's room. Oh. He should he should have gone with giga-capitalism. Uber capitalism is hedging. You can just say capitalism by itself, Bernie. No, he can't, because apparently he's for capitalism. Yeah. My position is I am not for Uber capitalism. What are you talking about? 500 pages of liberal bullshit. Uber reformism. I'm just wondering, who is this going to influence? I mean, I think on behalf of the Democratic Party, he's hoping it'll keep some more people confused about what to do next politically. But will this have any effect on anyone in the pipeline he participated in 2016? Well, I'm happy to have been part of the Bernie to communist, Bernie to Marx pipeline. Sadly, not everyone has gone down that pipeline yet, but we have saved the souls we can, so to speak. I mean, this is why we're doing this broad, publicly accessible agitation and education, because we need to make the pipeline that can actually bring people into being effective self-advocates for the working class that isn't, that understands what opportunism and reformism are and combats them. We need to educate people about Marxism for real. Like, hey, did you like what Bernie was talking about? We can tell you how to actually get it, because it's worked before in other places. I can't imagine the same amount of people will follow him if he tries something in 2024. No, I refuse to imagine it. I mean, yeah, I think the Bernie ship has sailed. He's also like a million years old, so I'm not sure that anyone will even believe he can like live through a presidency. But yeah, I mean, after he sells you out twice, yeah, Biden is my friend, so he can. I can't read the comment because there's typos and I don't know how to correct it. Yeah. Capitalism is the problem, proceeds to blame neoliberalism, then proceeds to say, I'm good friends with the guy doing his damnedest to uphold American capitalism and its strongholds worldwide, gaslighting people about the pandemic, getting hundreds of thousands of people killed and injured, while really tens of millions of people injured by COVID. Yeah. Somebody's randomly mentioning XBB. The Omicron subvariant XBB.1.16 is causing havoc in the country, where cases have soared 13-fold. I have no idea what the hell you're saying here. Yes, XBB.1.16 is one of the two strains, the other one being 1.9.1, that can outcompete 1.5, and one of those two is going to be the next big strain. Maybe both of them will be driving the wave. This snippet is atrocious. Yeah, I literally could not read that anymore. But, Sanders better not run. I don't need to see him lose for the third time. It almost smells. It's like I'm not saying this for real, but it's like you could almost see it as like from the psyop angle of just like trying to demoralize the left. Like, oh, left, it's your everybody's favorite Bernie Sanders. Watch him get pummeled. You know, it's like on Hannity and Combs, how they would have Combs on, and he was this sort of like ridiculous straw man of like wimpy, like pencil neck, like liberal that they would just sort of like beat up on. Like it served no purpose to actually have stimulating like balanced discussion. He was literally just there so people could like watch like a liberal getting beat up on. Have you always been this bad, Bernie? Was I so blind? No, I'll tell you what happened. I supported Bernie as a positive development in the U.S. left, in that we have not had a left for like a very, very long time. And so in the sort of recent past, in the 2000s, you had kind of the anti-war movement, but it was a bit inchoate and not really around any particular political platform. In fact, if anything, libertarians were probably the most organized force in that, sadly, because Democrats would be all about being anti-Bush when it was convenient, but then, Pelosi and Conyers got in 2006. Immediately, they're like, impeachment is off the table. And most of the Democrats just fell right in line with that, and the left was very much not organized. Keep in mind, this is the 2000s, not that long ago, but prior to social media, where people are really doing more of the networking and daily ideology sharing. It just was a lot slower prior to that. Also, the lines of the class struggle were just not as sharply drawn in many ways culturally. But anyway, then after 2008, a lot changed. People really started talking about capitalism again by name. Then you had Occupy Wall Street, which is like the first left moment on a mass scale in the US in decades. And that was specifically anti-capitalist. Like, it had many flaws. It was anarchist. There was a lot of sort of baby leftist brain thinking in Occupy. But it was a step. It kind of put these things back on the map again. To me, Bernie, coming up 5 years after Occupy, 4 or 5 years after Occupy, it was taking that momentum and then putting it into a more stable and better articulated form, and then, taking it on a stadium tour around the country. And that was really good, because Occupy refused to adopt like a platform and other like rookie mistakes. But then Bernie kind of picked up a lot of that momentum and took a lot of the grievances that were developed during Occupy and then formulated it into a platform. Although, again, arguably, like even the Green Party had already done that, let alone other left parties in the United States. Just the Green Party wasn't getting that kind of publicity. But Bernie ran in the Democratic primary and got a lot of publicity. And like I said, that was the best moment for creating a left party, or just even feeding people into the Greens, that had existed for 50 years. The Greens hadn't existed for 50 years. But, I mean, for a left party to make a move like that, it was the first time in at least 50 years that there was like that kind of an opening. And again, he pissed it away in favor of building up the Democratic Party, which, we're going to totally transform the Democratic Party, Bernie told us. And my Bernie is rusty, but how did that go? Ask AOC, ask the squad, ask Bernie, how's this total transformation of the Democratic Party going? I don't see it at all. At all. So that was a lie, and it's always going to be a lie, and we need to understand you can't transform the Democratic Party. I don't know how many times this needs to be demonstrated. You can't do it. The party is sewn up by the richest people in the country. We need to make a left that is independent of all of that. And Bernie is, to the extent that Bernie is not leading that movement, then he is an opponent of that movement, because, it would imagine if rather than trying to build up the Democratic Party, in 2020, Bernie and AOC had gone into the Greens, for example. They just said like, fuck it. You know what? And that they went on a stadium tour saying what I'm saying now, which is reality, which is, hey, you know what? The Democratic Party can't be reformed. We did X, Y, Z. It's been done before us as well. Bernie was not the first person to try to do this. it can't be done, and we need an independent party, and this and that. Well, I mean, that's not who Bernie is, and that's not who AOC is, so they weren't going to do that. What I'm saying is, if somebody with their status had done something like that, it would have been a major step forward, which is why they had to make sure it did not happen. And then the best that we get in the U.S. otherwise is like, people are like, Jesse Ventura should run. How about no thanks? Like, anyway. Another factor in Bernie having, a twice a century opportunity maybe, is he had actually been an independent congressman and senator for 3 decades. Like, that's kind of like really valuable experience. He could actually do the job. He actually knew the system. But again, it seems he's, in the end, more for the system than actually against it. I mentioned before, we did an article about AOC. She said in the fall of 2021, maybe it was even 2020, she gave an interview, I think, in the New Yorker, where she said, you can't do anything in the Democratic Party. Like, I am a progressive. I wanted to do these things, and you just can't do it. I covered it on the channel. Okay, but then why aren't you following your own advice and getting out of this party where nothing can be done? So anyway, the question, has Bernie always been this bad, or were you so blind? No, I think that the left has done a lot more growth than maybe any of us realize. And I do think that the Bernie betrayal, it's not the best case scenario, but I do think people have still learned from it. How does it go? Wer has uns verraten, Social Demokraten? Who has betrayed us, Social Democrats? It's kind of a thing. And yeah, that's clearly, it was unclear to me from some of his rhetoric early on, is Bernie more of a social democrat, or does he actually believe in the end of capitalism? I think we can now settle that question clearly, to the extent that there was any lack of clarity about that. Wage labor is slave labor, just not chattel slavery where they own you as property. They don't need the whips anymore. Yeah, I mean, Bernie, AOC, Ilhan Omar, yeah, they could pull like 10% of the votes. Or at least create a big worker movement that later becomes a party. But when you feed it into the Democratic Party, it gets completely stripped of any real power. Does Joe have worse politics than Hillary? Can you name a single good thing that happened in the last few years? Capitalists, whether they're just capitalists or uber capitalists, capitalists who drive Ubers, believe that it is perfectly natural for there to be injustice in the world as long as they're not themselves the ones suffering it. Yeah. Yeah, what's wrong with the average American, especially Trump, working class Trump voters? They're temporarily embarrassed millionaires, of course. This is that petty bourgeois consciousness that, many people in the U.S. will be proletarians. Their actual class standing, their actual class status will be proletarian. They're a propertyless wage worker. But their consciousness is petty bourgeois. It's imitating the bourgeoisie. They think that they're little capitalists, and so they walk around acting. They have. Hold on. Background noise there. They walk around acting and thinking as if their interests are bourgeois. They're not. But they have that false consciousness. They, they pretend to be little bourgeoisie. And some people are actually small capitalists. Their class position is petty bourgeois. So their petty bourgeois mindset is more forgivable because it actually matches their class status. Still, those people should ally with the proletariat because we are the future. That's what capitalism creates, is proletarians more than anything else. And the odds of a petty bourgeois, small capitalist, making it into the big bourgeoisie is much smaller than them getting ruined and ending up in the proletariat. So you might as well plan ahead and identify with your future class interests as a proletarian. But yeah, we have this petty bourgeois individualistic consciousness, and it's a country of mostly proletarians, but think that they're petty bourgeois, and it's a huge problem. I think that the U.S. left's anarchism, that petty bourgeois individualism, is a symptom of that. And, you know, I do think that there is hope for anarchists. A lot of them are people who have identified capitalism as bad, still haven't shaken that petty bourgeois individualism. I do think that there's hope for many of them, but they do have to come out of that. You just can't do anything really effective while you're still carrying that around. Bourgeoisie taught it to you. You need to shake it off. There are also aspects of policy that we know Bernie knows about fiscal policy that he literally says stuff denying. Yeah. Yeah, in other words, he plays dumb about what's going on. He's a sheepdog. I mean, you know, we haven't had this discussion in a while, but I mean, that's effectively, if you want to boil it down to a word, he's herding people into the Democratic Party under false pretenses. You know, it's, oh, hope and liberation, follow me. And then, no, then the door slams shut behind you and you're stuck with Joe Biden, like, breathing in your ear or whatever. I wonder how Bernie would even get public health care done if Congress and the Senate sabotage him. Well, he used to talk about that, and it's by rallying the masses. He said, he was asked that in 2016. They're like, how are you going to get Medicare for all when, you know, the Congress is so corrupt? And it was funny because it was like mainstream media asking him this. They're like, you know, the same people that pay us to be on CNN or whatever, you know, they're going to send their political representatives after you too, right? And he's like, yeah, well, we will fight for it. We will rally millions of people across the United States and we'll fight for it. The masses determine, I mean, he didn't say the masses determine history, but he said the correct thing, which was they're going to rally people to do it. But the thing is, people don't rally behind the Democratic Party because they know it's fake. So you can't do that from within the Democratic Party. Does Bernie deserve any credit for that pipeline? Despite his abandoning of it, people often tell me I should respect him for starting the Bernie to Marx pipeline. Bernie, I think, would be the last person to really support the Bernie to Marx pipeline in the end. No, I mean, I think, you know, in a country like, well, we had 2008, we had Occupy. I think something like Bernie was bound to happen. Bernie, in fact, was even a likely conduit for it because he was this sort of, you know, vaguely left independent who had been in the Congress for a long time and so on. I don't think what he does is completely fake either. I don't think it's been completely fake, you know, his whole career. But I do think he's been very opportunistic and has made many deals with the Democrats that are completely unprincipled. And he's not a fighter. He's not a fighter. So some of the sheep herding in the end may be out of sheer cowardice. I don't know. But it's definitely not helpful, and it's definitely not leading in the right direction. So, you know what? Let me. There's another thing I wanted to bring up. I almost forgot about. I was so like put off. I was so reeling by the Bernie Sanders thing that I almost forgot. I had another clip. So Martin Luther King Jr. and I forget what the tie-in even here was. Did Bernie mention it? This is still from the Bernie book. God, this is the last screenshot. He says Uber capitalism again. That's not the way Uber capitalists run companies these days, but it is the way that working Americans would run things if they had the authority and resources necessary to take charge of their own futures. Well, you know, Bernie, you could be advocating for that, but you know, advocating for it from inside the Democratic Party is not really fooling anyone. Will we treat workers with respect? You know, when workers take power, it's not a question of will someone powerful treat us with respect. We demand the respect and we will take it. So anyway, I forget what the tie-in here was, but for some reason I put in the same folder. Martin Luther King Jr. speech, the Where Do We Go From Here, 1967 speech. This had something to do, I think this whole general zone of the sort of Christian socialist, this general zone of sockdem opportunism, and so on. Yeah, I literally forget why I even looked this up, but trust me, it's relevant. So this is Martin Luther King Jr. on Marxism specifically. Let's read. I'm sure you'll all love it. I want to say to you as I move to my conclusion, this is the end of the speech, as we talk about where do we go from here, that we must honestly face the fact that the movement must address itself to the question of restructuring the whole of American society. Audience, he says yes. There are 40 million poor people here, and one day we must ask the question, why are there 40 million poor people in America? And when you begin to ask that question, you're raising a question about the economic system, about a broader, we could say, systemic distribution of wealth. When you ask that question, you begin to question the capitalistic economy. And I'm simply saying that more and more, we've got to begin to ask questions about the whole society. We are called upon to help the discouraged beggars in life's marketplace. But one day we must come to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. It means that questions must be raised. And you see, my friends, when you deal with this, you begin to ask the question, who owns the oil? You begin to ask the question, who owns the iron ore? You begin to ask the question, why is it that people have to pay water bills in a world that's 2/3 water? These are words that must be said. Now, don't think you have me in a bind today. I'm not talking about communism. Okay, so get ready for this. What I'm talking about is far beyond communism. My inspiration didn't come from Karl Marx. My inspiration didn't come from Engels. My inspiration didn't come from Trotsky. My inspiration didn't come from Lenin. Boo. Anyway, yes, I read the Communist Manifesto and Capital a long time ago, and I saw that maybe Marx didn't follow Hegel enough. He took Hegel's dialectics, but he left out his idealism and his spiritualism. I'm sorry, did you not understand anything Marx wrote about idealism? Amazing. And he went over to a German philosopher by the name of Feuerbach, and he took his materialism and made it into a system that he called dialectical materialism. I have to reject that. Well, okay, bye. What I'm saying to you this morning is communism forgets that life is individual. No, it does not. Capitalism forgets that life is social. True. And the kingdom of brotherhood is found neither in the thesis of communism nor the antithesis of capitalism, but in a higher synthesis. Now, my head is exploding here reading that. That's not how the dialectic of this works, but anyway, it is found in a higher synthesis that combines the truths, reading very small text here, it combines the truths of both. So there are truths of capitalism we're going to keep, like individualism. What? Now, when I say questioning the whole society, it means ultimately coming to see that the problem of racism, the problem of economic exploitation, and the problem of war are all tied together. These are the triple evils that are interrelated. And if you'll let me be a preacher just a little bit, one night, a juror came to Jesus, and he wanted to know what he could do to be saved. Jesus didn't get bogged down on the kind of isolated approach of what you shouldn't do. Jesus didn't say, now Nicodemus, you must stop lying. He didn't say, Nicodemus, you must not commit adultery. He didn't say, Nicodemus, you must stop cheating if you're doing that. He didn't say, Nicodemus, you must stop drinking liquor if you're doing that excessively. He said something altogether different because Jesus recognized something basic, that if a man will lie, he will steal, and if he will steal, he will kill. I mean, I'm not sure about that, but so instead of just getting bogged down on one thing, Jesus looked at him and said, Nicodemus, you must be born again. In other words, your whole structure must be changed. A nation that will keep people in slavery for 244 years will thingify them, make people into things, and therefore they will exploit them and poor people generally economically. And a nation that will exploit economically will tend to have foreign investments and everything else. It will have to use its military might to protect them. All of these problems are tied together. What I'm saying today is that we must go from this convention and say, America, you must be born again. So he's kind of talking about a revolution, like completely remaking the society anew, except he wants to take the communism out, that Marx was not idealist enough, you know what the fuck he's talking about. But this is the kind of thing, I guess my main point is, that you can sell to people in the United States because they don't know shit from shit. And this is really what we're out to change here. Now, I'm going to take some comments on your thoughts on what was wrong with Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech there. And it's not just, oh, he insulted our team. No, what he's saying is wrong. If you study the history of communism, like what he's trying to do there has been done so many times before, and it never amounts to anything. So anyway, while we do that, let us thank the patrons whose names are on the screen, patreon.com/socialismforall. I am not independently wealthy, and these contributions allow me time to do this channel. I would make content even if no one supported, but I wouldn't be able to spend so much time on it. So thank you to the patrons. Let's get in our closing comments, and we will finish up for today. I should go to the bookstore and replace all of the pages from Bernie's book with State and Revolution. Yeah, you could just switch the dust jackets. That would work. There are so many kids today who are starting to openly call themselves communist. And yeah, I've never seen that before. I agree. That's a positive development, even if most of them haven't yet read the materials. I agree, but more and more of them are reading it, and we're just getting started. So absolutely, absolutely. That's what we're trying to make more accessible and easier to do here at this channel, is read it to people, help them digest it, have some discussion, you know, and then once you're ready, you can join a Marxist club or party and things will take shape. But yeah, we want to at least get people started here. I can do a better Bernie. It's very rusty. I haven't done it in a long time. In my country, the left party visited Hoja's grave and they got roasted. In my country, if you're far left, you must be Titoist. Interesting. Yeah, you don't transform the Democratic Party. It transforms you. Very much agree. Well, it's like we're going to pull Biden right. No, he's going to pull, we're going to pull Biden left. No, he's going to pull you right. Yeah. Bernie functioned as a progressive shoehorn into the good cop, bad cop dichotomy of U.S. politics. Bernie was like the extra good cop. He was like, come on, please, please, believe in the system one more time. And, you know, again, was this entirely his conscious intent? I don't know. But whether it was through cowardice, whether it was through, you know, contrived calculation, whatever it was, it's what he ended up doing. AOC, you can't operate within the Democratic Party. Also, AOC continues to operate within the Democratic Party. Yeah. You're welcome for the long and detailed answer. You got me going. What can I say? I couldn't stop. A lot of anarchists have their heart in the right place, and I respect their passion. I agree. Anarchism as an ideology is not going to work in the long term, and would like to have that discussion. We have a playlist on the channel, Marxists on Anarchism. It eventually will be longer, but there's a fair amount of stuff on there already. I mean, there's just kind of some major basic points that I think that account for the main differences and the flaws of anarchism. If you can grasp those, you can kind of get most of it. Or you can just read State and Revolution. That'll do it too. Thoughts on Brian Becker? I don't follow closely, but we did discuss this a few weeks ago in discussing the Answer rallies, if you want to go look that up. Just back a few, like 5 streams maybe. I wonder how different Bernie would be today if the USSR was still around. I mean, how different would we all be if the USSR was still around? Then again, if the USSR was still around, are we talking like USSR that continues to sink into revisionism, but stays shy of the 1985 stuff that tanked it? You know, who knows? Or, you know, yeah, could the USSR have kind of turned it around? You know, it's interesting. I guess I hadn't really thought of it this way, but my understanding of the major Gorbachev reforms that kind of killed the USSR in a very short span of time were inspired by China's market reforms. And I wonder if we had seen a USSR fighting that rather than taking it as inspiration, what could have developed for both countries eventually. If anybody has, developed thoughts, books, articles on that, I'd be interested to read them. I wonder who paid him to use the term Uber capitalism. I'm thinking Uber. I'm thinking Uber did. Bernie remembers what happened to his other good friend, Paul Wellstone. Yeah, look it up. Uber communism. There you go. Yeah, we'll be doing the actually probably next month we'll be doing the principles of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism. We're gonna do two, I think, when we do that. So yeah, that's coming up soon. If the USSR was still around, the absolute destruction of the late 80s and entire 90s around the world would have been so different. Like, I can't even imagine. Yeah, all the, 90s nihilism. Bad times. Bad times. There was some kind of somewhat fun, subversive stuff that came out, but it was, so bitter that just the optimism was completely gone. Completely gone. Bernie trying to form his sex cult in his last days. Understandable. I can't even. Let's not even go there. What capitalism does to critical thought. All right, let me jump down to the bottom here. I do have to kind of go. So just want to see if there's any comments on the MLK thing. This is some brain dead shit. Yeah. So Marx was wrong because he was, quote, materialist, apparently. The Dialectic of Bernard C. Sanders. This is Bernie's opus, a Nietzschean endeavor. Born Again smacks of theocratic dog whistling. The whole thing sucked, but the end really sucked. I think that's about the best summary you can give it, really. Bernie wants a qualitative change to the system by making small quantitative adjustments. All right, somebody's been listening to Anti-During. Religious socialism forces you to capitulate to reactionary viewpoints. And I get it. You're trying to use the language that people have been inculcated with by reactionaries in order to, try to use the reactionary ideology against the reactionaries. I get it. But I don't think generally it works that well, and people could just as easily learn new terminology instead. It is so deeply confused that it calls for revolution without any ability to enact that revolution, because if you leave out the dialectical materialism, you leave out the whole concept of proletarian revolution. Yeah, I mean, let's not forget the different... MLK was I don't know if he didn't understand what he was talking about or what, but he's trying to say that it was wrong to take out Hegel's idealism. So what are you saying? That literally the world of ideas is primary and we have to change those first? Because it doesn't it sounds almost like the Marx is a godless commie that wants to burn your church down kind of argument. And that isn't what fucking dialectical materialism means. I mean, specifically, that's not what it means. As far as Dr. King goes, civil rights leaders and black people in general were getting murdered for far less left rhetoric. He was going more and more left as time went on. Well, this was, I think, his last speech, so that was as left as he got. He did start opposing the Vietnam War, but was still obviously sprinkling his speeches heavily with anti-communism, anti-Marxism. Eating protein from various sources is not something, I have no idea what you're talking about. All right. MLK had already started a campaign against capitalism, racism, and militarism, the three evils, and had an encampment in Washington. But he kind of had a weak link to Marxism itself. Well, I don't know if you heard what I just read, but he was specifically speaking against Marxism. In Mexico, they're presenting the Poverty of Philosophy tonight. I'm excited because it's a really good translation. All right, well, let's all go to that if we're in Mexico. If not, we're going to be streaming again tomorrow, so just find something else to do in the meantime. I appreciate everybody turning out. Thanks again to the patrons. Thanks to everybody who's going to be showing up on YouTube after the fact. But I got to run. Again, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, April 13. Thursday, we will do this again. More articles, more chat, more fun. See you then.